and you can't get it back. Like you can't just supplement a probiotic and then that probiotic seeds your gut and lives in you.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. I'm Dr. Daniel Ricciardi. Today we have a very special video for you in honor of International Women's Day, which is today, March 8th. Well, by the time this is published, this will be published on March 8th. Today is not March 8th. But anyways, I have the opportunity of interviewing someone who's brilliant in the gut health space. She is a functional nutrition therapy practitioner, author of Paleo Green Recipe ebook, and helps clients with IBS, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, leaky gut, bloating, reflux, constipation. Thank you and welcome. Thanks for being here, Heather Munnelly. How's it going?
It's going good. I'm excited to chat with you. It's been a little while.
Yeah, been a few months, I think, since we talked the one time on Zoom before, got to know each other a little bit. So, from your content and our previous conversations that we've mentioned, I know you've had some of your own battles with gut health going way back. Can you share just a little bit about yourself, your personal experience with digestive issues, and then what you do now?
Yeah, so I developed IBS kind of suddenly. Looking back, it was probably something called post-infectious IBS, where I basically was traveling in Mexico with my family in high school, and I ended up getting digestive issues that stemmed from that day. There's a lot of other like stress and potential like triggers at that time as well. But I, at the time, had no idea about any of this. So I really just knew that I had a great digestive system prior to that, and all of a sudden I didn't. And that lasted for 10 years. And I eventually healed in 2018. So it will be 6 years this summer. And I can pinpoint it very well because there was a lot of things I did that year after spending 10 years of seemingly trying everything. I ended up being able to heal my IBS when I started to look at root causes. So things like SIBO, um, parasites, candida, and I was just the unfortunate person, like many of us are, that had all of the above. So once I kind of addressed those issues, I noticed that all of the IBS symptoms that I had miraculously went away.
Wow, that's quite the story. 10 years. Well, happy 6 year anniversary as it's coming up. So it's exciting to be feeling better for that long period of time. You mentioned you mentioned SIBO, Candida, and parasites. Question on testing, I guess, because obviously trying to figure out what's going on can be difficult. If you're somebody that maybe had similar digestive issues, how would you determine if testing is worth doing? Because obviously some of these tests, they're not cheap to get done. So you want to make sure they're worthwhile doing. So what type of test have you found most useful in your practice?
Yeah, I think that it's really good. I know this is kind of outside the box to say, but I think it's really good when people have done like the traditional things first. If you are new to your gut healing journey or new to dealing with IBS symptoms or any of that, going and getting a colonoscopy and just getting reviewed and assessed by a gastroenterologist, I think is a good move. It's not to say that it's the only thing you'll need to do, but I think it's good to rule out the scary things like colorectal cancer. There's obviously a lot of different things that can cause the same symptoms, and things like bloating and digestive issues, they can be as simple as a bacterial imbalance, but it could be something worse. So I always think it's a good idea to at least go and get checked out for those things, get checked out for celiac. um, but then as far as like testing that I use in my practice, we like the more functional stuff. So most people that I work with have already gone to the gastro, they've done the colonoscopy, endoscopy, all of that. They've been told that they are perfectly healthy, and they've been given typically like an SSRI or some medication, and they're not feeling well, and they're not digesting fiber and healthy foods. So when people are at that point, I think it's good to look at SIBO. So we love breath testing. Um, there's a lot of different great breath tests that you can use, but I like the home options. And we love stool testing. There's a bunch of different stool testing options as well. So it sort of just depends, I think, on what you are assessing for. So PCR tests, things like the GI map and the vibrant gut zoomer, they're really good for looking at pathogens, but they're not as good for looking at if you want to assess for like diversity.
Mhm.
We would do more of like a shotgun test or 16S test. So, kind of depending on the person's budget and what they want to look at or what we want to look at for them, we'll select a stool test. Um, but I think you can get so much awesome info from any stool test and from doing a breath test. Those two alone are probably the most common that we work with for digestive issues. And then there's also different directions you can go. If leaky gut is suspected, you could do like a classic lactulose mannitol urine test. Trying to think of what else we order a lot. We see a lot of histamine imbalances too that are stemming
Hmm.
usually from these different infections that people can have. Obviously, bacteria, parasites, and fungal organisms can create their own histamine too. So typically it coincides with the digestive issues where we see, things like histamine intolerance. We can order serum testing to look at the DAO enzyme. How well are they able to break down histamine and their histamine levels in the blood to see like how is there an excessive amount of histamine there causing symptoms. So that's another favorite test. And I could talk forever about testing. Like we like organic acids tests. The metabolomics test is a great organic acid test that also looks at some other things we like around detox pathways, minerals. So that's another good one.
Wow,
Test.
yeah, that's great info. Like that's obviously like you're very knowledgeable on the testing. You work with a lot more tests than I personally do, so it's cool to hear. It sounds like it's very nuanced what you would ask for a patient, and depending on what symptoms they have and what they've tried in the past. So, but it sounds like from what you're saying, do the standard treatments first to look at the really scary stuff like the colonoscopies and those type of things that typically like the insurance would cover. And then if you're not finding any luck, depending on what's going on, you listed a lot of different examples of tests you may do. If that sounds like I summarized it, at least okay.
Yeah, that nailed it. I mean, that's
Okay.
definitely my approach is more testing, and I think that just comes from the fact that I was offered like no testing. So now
Mhm.
I like to be really thorough and rule out a lot of stuff that can be going on.
Gotcha. Do for other people what you may not have necessarily had during your own experience to save them a lot of time and uncomfortable years.
100%.
Awesome. Well, transitioning to other women's gut health topics now. For women, bloating is obviously a common symptom that comes up. In your opinion, is there a level of bloating in terms of like the frequency and severity of it that someone can have before they suspect that there's actually a real problem here? Because someone may not feel 100% perfect all the time, obviously,
Mhm.
but what would you say? Like, how would you answer that?
Yeah, it's tricky because it is normal to an extent to have some gas that you pass. And when I think about bloating, I just think about kind of gas that's trapped. Like it's causing distension in your abdomen and making you look maybe a little bit pregnant, tightening your jeans a little bit, like making everything feel tight. That's what I think of as bloating, and that isn't caused by your own human body. So I always say that that bloating sensation is coming from gas production that your human body can't even create. It's always coming from microbes. So some amount of that is normal because we all have a microbiome. We will usually ask people, do you pass gas? Like, is it silent? Does it happen less than 20 times a day? Is it without smell? Is it something that just happens kind of like in a healthy way? Those are signs that it would be more healthy gas. I think more unhealthy would be, is there a rotten egg sulfur smell to it? Is it happening excessively, meaning like more than those 20 small, quiet, like unscented, I guess,
Yeah.
then I would look at that. And then when it comes to like bloating, because you asked about bloating more, is it feeling like you have really trapped gas that's not being released ever? That would also be problematic and kind of indicate some motility issues there. So we don't want you to have that either. If we're going based on like how many times do you pass gas a day and it's like zero, but you have this really distended belly and it's really like painful and you can feel that there's gas there, but it's trapped, then that's also like a sign that there's microbial imbalances in there to be looked at and things to be optimized to make it more in the direction of the more healthy um, indicators that I mentioned before. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. So it sounds like it's not like an exactly always clear cut answer. You have to kind of know like a little bit of gas is normal.
Mhm.
But if it feels like everything, like nothing's moving whatsoever, that's also not a good thing. So if I'm if I'm kind of relaying that correctly, it's what it sounds like. Thank
Yeah,
you.
totally.
The next one I got here. So, digestive issues during the menstrual cycle are a significant problem for a lot of women, and it can range from mild symptoms to very severe, very painful symptoms. Are there any supplements, diets, or strategies that you've found to be the most helpful?
For menstrual symptoms, yeah, I know that for a lot of women, when they're dealing with like digestive issues, they'll also have menstrual issues that I think the best thing when you know that you have both of those things going on is to look at obviously the root issues and because there is a huge hormonal element to the gut, like the gut bacteria really influences hormones. So if you have a lot of imbalance in your gut, the menstrual cycle is not going to be a good time for you and you can only band-aid
Mm,
that so well. If you deal with cramping, this is like my favorite um, product ever for women with cramping. It's just a topical magnesium, so it kind of is like taking an Epsom salt bath, but you don't have to take a bath. So you can spray it right on your cramps, and that will help a lot. It will also help you sleep and manage your like PMS moodiness if you experience with that. It can help with the anxiety depression component too. But again, it's only a band-aid. There are different needs in the female body for carbohydrates throughout the menstrual cycle too. And this is where I think getting to the root of the issue is going to be really important because the best way to really fuel your hormones leading up to your period, especially like the few days beforehand, is to increase your carbohydrates so that your body can make those hormones. But if you're dealing with something like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, increasing carbohydrates is not it's not going to feel
mm,
good. You might have an increase of bloating, gas, depending on what type of microbial overgrowth that you have. You could even be more constipated, which is not going to help you to detox that estrogen efficiently. So it could make things feel worse for you if you're dealing with that underlying imbalance in your gut. That's where it comes down to addressing the root cause, like or getting rid of rebalancing your gut microbes, making sure that you don't have an overgrowth present. There's other types of overgrowths too that can really impact your phase two liver detox, like basically estrogen detox pathway. So if you have a lot of, this might be a little bit more of a rabbit hole than you intended, but if you have really high levels of like proteobacteria, which also are, there are things like E. coli that also happen to overgrow commonly in SIBO. If you have like an E. coli overgrowth anywhere in your gut, that's going to create more of this enzyme called beta glucuronidase that undoes your estrogen detox pathway. And when that happens, you're going to have estrogen in circulation in your blood longer. And
mm.
so that's not going to feel great depending on where you are in your cycle. So again, it's kind of like looking at those root causes, supporting your body nutritionally, but also making sure that you're aware of the fact that like if you eat more carbs to support your menstruation, it might not feel good if you have SIBO.
Interesting. Okay, so you got the carbohydrates going into like the few days prior. You got that magnesium. What was the name of that product, by the way? Just if you don't mind saying it.
This is the Trace Minerals brand, and this one is the Zechstein magnesium oil.
Okay,
It's so good. I've been using this for like six years, I think, or more than that, probably like 7, 8 years. And I give it
nice.
to everyone. Even like my dad has been taking this as long as I have, because magnesium is so important for like all of us, really.
He uses it topically as well.
Every day in the morning after his shower, he puts this on.
Very cool. Well, it's safe. Yeah.
Help him. I mean, cardiovascular health, right? Magnesium when you're an older man, or it helps with like muscle joint pain. Magnesium is one of those things that's connected to almost every enzymatic process in the body, so it has a lot of benefits.
Yeah, that's what I hear as well on the magnesium, and it's hard to get a sufficient amount. But I appreciate all that info. It definitely taught me a lot about that specific topic. So I'll have to rewatch this and remember everything you said.
Yeah, cool.
Moving on. So birth question on birth control for you as well. Specifically, impact of birth control on digestion and gut health. Obviously, birth control really common. There's a lot of different forms of it, such as the pill, implants, IUDs, which are intrauterine devices. How big of a deal is birth control, like specifically for like gut health for women? And are there certain types of birth control that can cause more problems or symptoms gut health wise?
I think it's a pretty big deal. I think that it's known all pharmaceutical drugs disrupt and displace certain nutrients. So there's these like nurses are very aware of this where they get these handbooks and they actually outline like what nutrients are depleted by taking certain medications long term. So if you're taking like a certain medication and you look into what it's depleting, you might be losing more like zinc, B6, vitamin C, or
Mm,
something of that nature, like some combination of nutrients that now you need to increase the amount of those you're getting in your body. Magnesium is depleted obviously a lot by all pharmaceutical drugs. But when it comes to birth control specifically, so you have to think of that, right? Like it's probably depleting certain things. It also is really well known for disrupting the gut microbiome. So it leads to less microbial diversity, which we know is like the worst thing ever for the gut. And so it kind of almost has a similar impact to taking antibiotics if you're on it for a long term. The problem
mm,
with oral, like, and I'm talking about oral birth control, it's very long term. So people will be on this for years and years and years, and they'll just go off it when they want to have children and go back on it. And that's the real problem is these things are the impacts of it, they're small if it's done like short term, but the long over the long term is where it really starts to have an impact. So on the gut microbiome, it can start to lead to dysbiosis, leaky gut, also yeast infections. I'm thinking also about you mentioned like IUDs and things like that. Like the copper IUD comes to mind too, because people will often use that if they're looking for more of a natural approach. And like just from a personal perspective, I dealt with copper toxicity for a really long time. So if you're somebody like that, or you deal with like pyroluria or some sort of like low zinc, that extra copper is not going to be a good thing. It's going to create an imbalance in your zinc and copper and iron ratios over time. So
mm.
I just think that there's always a consequence of taking anything really long term. And it's something to consider. It doesn't mean that everybody should like stop their birth control immediately, take out your IUD. It
Yeah,
just means like be aware of the consequences it might be having. And there's alternatives too, like the aura
yeah,
ring.
yeah. Like you said, it's obviously like tough decision because obviously it's serving a purpose, but using it for a long term also seems to be not great from what you're saying. I mean, I have friends that know people that have used it from the time they're in their teenage years into their 30s as well. So I don't think that's really uncommon for people to do. So
Yeah, that's super common. And that's like a life. I mean, it's one of those things that for women, if you end up on an oral birth control and you start it when you're 15, you could easily be taking that until you're 50. Like it's a real long-term thing. It's
yeah,
safe, maybe 2 years you go off it to have a child or something, but like that's a lot of years to be on something that is having this like small impact on you that's building up over the course of a third of your life.
yeah, I hear you on that. I've heard this talked about a little bit before, but I feel like it's not something that's really super well known.
Yeah, I feel like nobody really talks about the gut impact of birth control, but it definitely is something that I always ask people. Like, are you on birth control? Have you taken antibiotics? Those two questions I ask almost every single person I talk to.
Yeah, it's good to bring up. Like you said before, obviously the right decision whether to use it or not. Obviously depends on the person, and I feel like as long as they have all the right information, they can make an informed choice what they think's best for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can like counterbalance it, right? At least if you have that info, you can then take those steps to, educating yourself about like what is it depleting, what is it what's how to offset it, maybe to support your gut microbiome a little extra, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Let's see here. Got a couple more for you. So, do you have a current diet, supplements, or things like you personally do to make sure that the issues that you had for all those years, like the 10 years, the SIBO, Candida parasites, don't come back?
Yes. I'm a big fan of fiber coffee. I know a lot of people probably that follow me on Instagram at least see me doing that every day, and they're probably like, "That's that sounds so strange," but um, prebiotics are so you can't like basically we all get our microbiome from our mom, and throughout our lives we take the birth control, the antibiotics, all of these things, and even just exposure to toxins, to glyphosate, all these things that harm our microbiome. And it's possible for some of those species in the gut to eventually go extinct. When you kill them, they go extinct like anything on the planet. And you can't get it back. Like you can't just supplement a probiotic and then that probiotic seeds your gut and lives in you. It will live there for max 2 weeks. Most of them, it's even less. It can be a couple days, a week, 2 weeks if it's like a spore type of probiotic. That's about the max. So the only way to truly feed the bacteria that's there and keep them happy and maybe even revive ones that you've killed off a lot of, but they're not totally extinct yet, is with prebiotics. So I'm a huge fan of keeping like prebiotics in my diet. So for me, that looks like sticking a fiber into my coffee. Obviously, not like psyllium fiber, something that it's more. I choose the ones that totally dissolve and they're invisible for my
Okay.
coffee. Throughout my diet, I just try and include a lot of sources of fiber, resistant starch, like beans. I know that's kind of unpopular right now. But all these, fruit, variety, color, all these things are really good for keeping the gut happy.
Awesome. And have you found that that fiber coffee, the prebiotic, is it a powder? Is like, can you get that same benefit from foods, or in your opinion, or have you found that the powders is just definitely better to include?
You could do it from foods. So, like, if I put inulin powder in my coffee, I'm like looking at my shelf of prebiotics. If I were to do inulin, which is a good one to support the immune system, you could alternatively just get that from onions and things that are inulin containing. And same with like, I take GOS. That's galacto-oligosaccharide. Don't take any of these things if you have SIBO. It's really going to bother you. Get rid of your SIBO first. But the GOS, I think I forget what foods you can get that from. I have lists of all the different foods. I just find it to be difficult to remind myself
Mm.
um, and to get enough variety in my diet every day. So I'm not somebody, believe it or not, I don't love to cook. I do cook, but I cook really simple. Um, I hate cooking. I'm like probably the only nutritionist that feels that way, but it is what it is. So I have
I
to lean.
don't, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
love it either, but I like eating, so it's just I think I would more if it didn't take any time to do, but
totally. Yeah. So it's a time saver for me for sure to do the powders, but you could totally do it with your diet.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, last question. If you had 30 seconds to give advice to a woman dealing with some chronic unexplained gut issues. You're in an elevator, you're going up 3 floors, got barely any time, and they're like, Heather, tell me, what do I have to do? 30 seconds. Like, what would you say?
Oh my gosh. I would say start with testing. And if they were telling me that they had gut issues, I would say, well, what's causing them? And if you don't yet know the answer to that, find out. So do find somebody to work with who can do stool testing, breath testing if you have any bloating, and rule out SIBO, rule out different imbalances in your gut bacteria and your microbiome. That's with more of a stool test. take a look at that. And then once you know what's going on and where the imbalances lie in your digestive tract, you'll have a roadmap for how to heal it because it will totally depend on that. Yeah, that would be my answer, I think, is start with functional testing.
So I like it. That is everything I have for you. I appreciate you going through and answering all those for us. Hopefully, if you watch this video, you get some really good value out of this because those are some really good answers from a very knowledgeable practitioner. Um, where can people find you, or if they want to get in touch or work with you, what's the best way to do that?
At Detox Heather on TikTok, Instagram, and my website is detoxheather.com. And yeah,
Awesome. I'm going to put all those in the description down here below if you're watching this. So if you want to check that out, you can just scroll down a little bit and you'll see it. But, anyways, thanks so much for being here, and
you
happy
too.
International Women's Day.
Yes, go women, girl power.